Hey everybody, this is Dude, and this is the Bourbon Boys Advent Tasting Podcast. We pulled together some of our favorite picks to share with you as we count down to Christmas. We hope you get a chance to taste some of these great bourbon brands this holiday season with friends and family. Until then, bourbon on.
I think I'm up.
Yeah, okay, David, you got this
one. This is kind of, at least in our neck of the woods, probably the most elusive bottle. And that's Blantons. So, because of our fine state of North Carolina and the way that they manage alcohol coming into our state, it's very difficult to find a lot of different bourbons, and one in particular is Blantons. So, I'm going to geek out on you guys just a little bit.
I can't wait to hear it.
Yep. So, in order for me to kind of tell you guys a little bit more about Blantons, I think we got to really start with Kentucky. So, about 95% of the world's supply of bourbon comes out of Kentucky. Kurt, that's a state where they have bourbon.
Yeah.
We've all been there. It was really a good trip. Sorry you couldn't make it. So, anyways.
I've been there, just not with you.
Okay. So the cool thing about Kentucky and what makes it special for bourbon, it's got a lot to do with the seasonality and the weather, but also there's a ton of limestone. And so it filters a lot of the deposits out of the water. And so the water's great for distilling. The soil and the climate is great for corn. Obviously, corn's a huge part of bourbon. But the interesting part with the swing in temperature and the seasonality of the weather has to do with the movement of the wood in the barrels. And so being a woodworking guy, I've always been kind of intrigued by wood as a medium, if you will, and the way that you have to work with it. Is different than most things because it is, or at least was at one point, a living thing. And so it moves and shrinks and expands and does all kinds of interesting things. And so with the changes in temperature, oak will absorb the bourbon that's in the barrel and then release it. And so that's where you get that oaky flavor as well as the amber color.
Interesting.
So, giving you guys that context just as we get into Blantons and some of the unique characteristics about the flavor, it'll tie back to that. So going back from all of that, how did Blantons come about? So interesting, in this day and age, there's lots of single barrel premium bourbons out there. And Blantons really was the first premium, or what they call super premium bourbon, that was a single barrel. And so that goes pretty far back to Colonel Blanton, who was a distiller. And we'll talk in a minute about how that connects back to single barrel. But the master distiller at Buffalo Trace Distillery, which is now what it's called, but it was something different at that time. It's all part of the Sazerac family now. But Elmer T. Lee was the master distiller, and he was there for many years and started, he's actually an engineer, and started facilities and doing a lot of different operations type work, but eventually knew that he wanted to become a distiller, and so really worked his way up and learned a lot. And he learned a lot from Colonel Blanton. So about a year before his retirement, was 1985, but so in 1984 he was tasked with coming up with a super premium bourbon. And so he thought about, well, how should I do this? And obviously remembered, his work with Colonel Blanton in the early 40s. And went back and thought about Colonel Blanton whenever he had to entertain really important guests or diplomats or whomever was coming through. He would go to Warehouse H there on the facility and would get kind of what they called the center cut barrels from that warehouse. And he would taste them, and he would find one that he really, really liked, and he'd bottle that entire barrel. Wow. And so that's where single barrel comes from.
Okay.
And so...
meaning it is bottled and sourced from one single barrel.
From one single barrel, based on the distillers tasting it and saying, yep, this is the one.
Where others are coming from maybe
multiple
same
barrels.
batch, but across multiple barrels.
Okay.
Okay.
Yep.
Interesting.
That's
Makes
interesting.
sense.
Yeah.
So he went with that same approach and basically went in and, hand-picked a barrel, and this is going to be this run of single barrel bourbons. So that was 1984. Elmer T. Lee then retired in 85, and he, is the one that you can basically stakes the claim of creating the single barrel bourbon and that super premium classification, if you will. The interesting thing, and this is where we bridge back to Kentucky and the swings in temperature and weather. Colonel Blanton, right after the repeal of Prohibition in 1933, he and any other distillers that were still in business, because a ton of distillers went out of business, obviously, they anticipated this increased demand. And so they started bringing bourbon back into production in a big way. And space was a major concern for them as they were producing all these barrels. They needed a place to put them all. And so Colonel Blanton decided to go with speed of construction over quality in some cases, and built a metal warehouse. And that is Warehouse H. And because of the thin metal walls, the change in temperature occurred more quickly than other warehouses. And so that absorption of the bourbon and the release happened more consistently and more frequently within that warehouse. And so that's where a lot of
that's really interesting.
The oaky taste and the amber color, but the interaction between the bourbon and the oak in that metal warehouse, again, happened more quickly than in other places. And so to this day, that's where Blanton's sits.
Very cool.
Yeah, very interesting stuff. The other cool thing that I like Blanton's for its taste. I mean, it really is a great tasting bourbon. It's also just fun, kind of that allure of finding that sucker, And I texted these three guys Christmas. I guess it was 2 days before Christmas last year. And I happened to be in one of our ABC stores, and I was checking out, and the cashier said, "Did you find what you're looking for?" I was like, "Well, no." He said, "Well, what were you looking for?" And I was like,
in that exact way. You have to see the face to understand that.
Kurt knows the face.
I do.
And the cashier kind of looked at me, and I was like, "Well, I was looking for, Blanton's or Buffalo." And he kind of looked at me and held up one finger like, "Hold on a second." And my eyes got really big, and I turned around, and the guy behind me was like, "Did he just say Blanton's?" And his eyes got big, and that guy yelled out, "Bring out 2." And so the cashier went in the back and came back out with 2 boxes, and Blanton's comes in a nice box with a little velvet bag. And so it was Christmas, right?
So, Tiny Tim, was he there?
Yeah.
God bless us, everyone.
That's everyone, yeah.
Fantastic.
So that's what I like about Blanton's. It's just it's the hunt.
It is, sure.
It is obnoxious, but at the same time, if it were on the shelf on a regular basis, it wouldn't be what it is, right?
And I can imagine that's outside of North Carolina, too. Like, it just doesn't seem to have, I know some people have collected a lot of the bottle tops.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, there's a young fellow that is in our office, and his parents have got a connection with a liquor store, I think in Ohio. And he's like, anytime you want it, just let me know.
Tomorrow.
Yeah. Yes. So, I mean, so it is interesting. And Du, you brought up the stoppers.
Right.
And the other cool thing with Blanton's is each bottle, first of all, it's a beautiful bottle. Very round, looks like a barrel. It's got a little stout top to it. And then the stoppers are cast metal of a horse and a jockey. And there are 8 different positions of the horse and the jockey that represent the positions of the horse and the jockey as they go around the track. And so the very last one obviously represents the S in Blanton's. And it's the jockey and the horse completely stretched out, crossing the finish line. And so if you look really closely on the stoppers, there's a BLANTO. So you got all the letters. Wow. And so in addition to hunting for the bottle, you also want to hunt for the bottle that has the letter you don't have.
Right.
Which is kind of cool.
Board game at this point.
Yeah, so it's kind of cool.
Very cool.
So we have collections starting now. We have keys to collect.
Yeah, blade and bow.
Yes, right.
Exactly.
So it's just, again, it's the fun.
It's a nice novelty.
Yeah. So it's a 93 proof, so it's pretty smooth. The nose, very vanilla, caramel, butterscotch. Some of the baking, clove, cinnamon, nutmeg a little bit. The taste is sweet. It's not TX sweet, but it's very smooth, very sweet. A little bit of citrus, and obviously the oak, just from, again, Warehouse H.
Yep.
Pulling and pushing that bourbon through the oak and driving that amber color and that oaky taste. So
that's brilliant.
Yeah, the website too. I mean, definitely guys check out their website. There's some really cool history, some really cool old school black and white photos of Colonel Blanton.
That's cool.
Elmer Tea, and then there's actually an Elmer Tea Lee bourbon that is out that we all need to try and get our hands on as well. That'd be a great one too. Apparently, it tastes very similar to Blantons, but I've heard that it's easier to find, but I've not found one yet. So.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's it.
Put on the list.
That's cool.
We gonna try it?
Yeah.
From all of us Bourbon Boys, we want to wish you all a very Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays. Bourbon on.